So what's Misogi?
Misogi. So I learned about this concept from a guy whose name is Marcus Elliott. He went to Harvard Med School, but he decided he didn't want to be a traditional doctor. He decided that he wanted to get into sports science. He wants to revolutionize sports science. And he kind of ends up doing it in a way. He's the first guy to really bring AI and movement tracking into pro sports. And by using this data, he can basically tell people, the way that your knee caves in as you do this, you might have a 60% chance of injury based on all the other cases we've seen of men of your size in the NBA, whatever. So he's kind of all about these numbers and data and figures that can improve performance. But he also believes that what improves performance and potential, it can't always be measured in a way. There's intangibles that some people have. And so to get to these, he does this idea called Musogi. Now the backup for this is why it's important is that if you think about how humans evolved, we used to have to do hard things all the time. No safety net. This could be from a big hunt, moving from summering to wintering grounds, tiger lurking in the bushes, all these different things. So we were challenged all the time. And if we failed, we would die. But each time we would take on one of these challenges, you would inevitably learn what your potential was, right? You would really have to dig deep, push, and you would come out of that, assuming it went well, you made it out the other side, knowing what you were capable of. But now in modern life, you start to see a shift where you can live a decent life and you're never really challenged, especially physically, in a way that it, sort of almost blends mind, body, spirit. You'll have your running water, you'll have your food, you'll have your home, you'll have your family, and it's really great. But, he argues, and I'm with him on this, that if you think of human potential as like a really big circle, it's like most people are kind of in this little dinner plate size thing right here because we never explore those edges, really what we're capable of. So enter Musogi. And this is this idea that once a year, I'm going to go out into nature, going to do something really hard, some challenging task. So there are only two rules of Musogi. Rule number one is that it has to be really hard. So he defines this by saying you have a 50-50 shot at finishing whatever it is, this Musogi task that you decided to take on. And it has to be true 50-50 because now I think when people take on challenges, especially when there's a physical element, they pick things that they know they will finish, that are within their capabilities. So if you look at how marathoners approach running a marathon, it's not, I don't know if I'm going to be able to finish this marathon. Right. I don't know if I'm going to be able to finish this marathon in
under 3 hours or whatever.
Yeah. The second rule of Musogi,
which I like as much as the first rule.
So you can't die. Don't die. Now that is kind of a tongue-in-cheek way of basically saying, be safe on this thing. So to give examples...
Wait, isn't there also a third sort of rule of Musogi?
There's guidelines. So
I thought there was we don't talk about Musogi. Like you don't go and like
advertise.
Your Musogi doesn't get up on Instagram.
Yes. So then there's two guidelines. The two guidelines are one, you don't talk about Musogi publicly. You can talk about it with friends, with your wife and close ones, but you don't put it on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. And the reason for that is so many times, now this guideline was a guideline before social media, but so much stuff that people do today is often for the gram, right? You want to do something so you can post it. And by removing this, all of a sudden you have this question of if you're doing something really hard and you want to quit, are you going to keep going for you, knowing that it's not going to be for a pat on the back, some sort of social implications? The second guideline is that the Musogi should be somewhat quirky. Make something up. The reason for that is because once you remove sort of artificial metrics, that changes the game, right? If you're doing a marathon, all of a sudden you're thinking about your time. You're thinking about all these different things that are kind of socially constructed. Whereas if you just pick some random task, it's like, well, let's just see if we can do it. We have no framework for this. And that kind of opens up the door for some interesting experiences. So some of the Musogis that this guy has done is one year, him and a few guys, they got an 85-pound boulder and they walked it underneath the Santa Barbara Channel. I think it was 5 miles. So one guy would dive down, pick up the boulder, walk 10 yards, drop it, go up. The next guy would dive down, rinse and repeat till you're at point B. But there's also simpler things like, here's this mountain that we see every day. Let's see if we can get up there in a single day. Things like that. Now, the point of these, there's 2 big reasons for doing something like this. One is that it teaches you that you chronically undersell your potential. So if you choose an appropriately hard task, you are going to have a moment where you go, I'm done. I got to quit. I've reached my edge. There's no going back from this. But if you can keep putting one foot in front of the other, then you get this other moment that's much more important. And that's where you look back and go, well, wait a minute. I thought my edge was back there, but I am clearly past it now. And that suggests that I'm selling myself short. And the more important question that comes from that is, okay, well, where else in my life am I selling myself short? So you see that you're capable of more. The second thing that comes from this is that it can reframe fear for people, because we're wired to avoid failure at all costs, because failure in the past used to mean death. So of course we would want to not fail. But today failure isn't death. It's, mistyping in an email, you misspeak when you're speaking to a group of people, something like that. Yet we still fear those kinds of things like their death. So sort of dancing on the edge of failure, you can realize that it's not that big of a deal. Now, when I first learned about this concept, it sounded cool. It sounded intriguing. At the same time, I'm like, okay, it's kind of quirky, just like some made up thing. And then I started really researching what was happening here. And we used to call things like this rites of passage. So when we had a young person who was at point A in their life and we needed to get them to point B, where they were more confident, competent, a better contributor to the tribe, what would we do? We would send them out into nature to do something really hard, right? And along the way, they would struggle, they would battle, they would have moments of doubt, but they would ultimately come out on the other side realizing that they were capable of a lot more and they could bring that back into society and improve the tribe as a whole. And you saw these, what's interesting is you see these across cultures. This wasn't that one tribe said, hey, we're doing this thing. It's pretty cool. You should try it too. And that tribe put the word out. No, these just pop up.
This arose independently throughout culture.
It just arises. And it's also in mythology. So if you look at the work of Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey, it's the hero exits the comfort of home. He or she goes into a trying middle ground. They're faced with battles. They have to go inward and they have to physically strive. And then they come back into society with the treasure or the talisman or whatever it is. Well, what is the treasure or the talisman? It's not the actual physical object. It's the way that person has changed and that change that they can bring back into society. And you've seen a falling away of traditional rites of passage like this, which is why when you were talking about sending your daughter to that camp, I got so excited because I think kids really would benefit, adults too, but kids in particular really benefit from having times where they get pushed to their edges and they have those moments of doubt that they're not sure what they're capable of, but then they cross it and realize, oh, I've got more on board than I really ever imagined. Because you look at what people can accomplish when the conditions are like a survive condition. It's incredible what people can do. And it also makes evolutionary sense to undersell yourself.
Yeah, keeps you safe.
Keeps you safe.
Yeah.
You don't want to be the hold my beer guy, right? That person dies. So it's a practice that I do in my own life. And as I said, it's when I first kind of heard about it, I go, yeah, sounds kind of fun. Also kind of like, quirky. And then when you start to learn more, it goes, oh, wow, this is actually a powerful thing. And when you look at research on challenges in people's lives, the people who have the worst rates of mental health are the people who have had a ton of challenges, like an overwhelming amount of challenges and traumas. But on the opposite end of the spectrum are people who have no challenge in their life and no traumas. They have equally poor rates of mental health. So it's kind of a U-shaped curve where having enough challenge in your life that you learn that what you're capable of, that you can persist through things, that you've got this, seems to be healthy for people.